Series of intimate in-person trading conferences in some of the greatest cities in America. It's Market Rebellion Live. Next up, this June in Sonoma County, California. Savor some of the finest wines in America while you level up your trading with Pete Najarian, John Najarian, AJ Monty, Ryan Mastro, and Bill Johnson. Sonoma is limited to just 25 seats to ensure every guest gets personal attention. So act now. Tickets are going fast.
Exactly sure what's going on with Pete's sound.
I think it's a woodpecker. No, I'm just kidding. I need to go talk to those guys and tell them, hey, man, you need to take a break for like 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
Welcome to the Rebel's Edge.
You never know what's going to happen, man. That's what rebels do, right?
Rebel's Edge, folks, episode 118. Thank you for joining us. Producer Jared, Pete, and I will be with you for probably the next 22 minutes, breaking down a little 1 minute macro and then 4 stocks and then some unusual activity. So, and apparently Pete needs to express more of,
I'll be back.
more of that same. So because of that, I'm going to handle the 1 minute macro. So 1 minute macro, it's really all about, folks, how aggressive is the Fed going to really be versus how aggressive they are with their verbiage. Because last week was the worst week of the year for the markets, meaning broad markets, Dow, S&P 500, NASDAQ, IWM. And we're going to have to see exactly how aggressive they stay versus how aggressive they say. And since you're back, Pete, you got 30 seconds.
Oh, nice. You did that really well. Sorry about that. I apologize. I do have guys working here. It's all post-Ian and everything else here in Florida. So I apologize. But in terms of macro, let's just look at the month of February. All you've got to do is say, what happened with the dollar? What happened with the 10-year? We've talked about it day in and day out. But you see those, as John's saying, they're going bottom left, upper right. That's what they've been doing. 105 in terms of the dollar. It's actually pulled back a little bit now. But with that as the backdrop, you can understand why people are saying, you know what? I might start shifting over here for a little while because you know what? The nervousness I have in the NASDAQ, that's exactly what we've been seeing playing out. That's your macro.
All right.
Cool.
As true to our word, folks, 1 minute, bang, macro. Bang. All right, Pete, I've got the former Seattle Genetics, that's SGEN, and these guys have some anti-cancer drugs known as antibody drug conjugates, or ADCs. And a lot of people have sort of taken a look at Seattle Genetics, or Seagen, again, as it's known, over the past few years. And now it seems Pfizer may be taking down the whole company and in a multi-billion-dollar takeover deal worth over $30 billion.
Yeah, this is a monster, John. And as you said, this is something that's been talked about. People have kicked it around. A lot of people kicking the can saying, hey, what do we think of this? Pfizer is apparently the one right now, at least, that everybody's putting the tab on, saying, all right, Pfizer's going to make this move. I will say this. They have an incredible pipeline, John. You talked about the fact that they are innovative in terms of what they're doing, therapies and so forth for cancer. That is exactly what their goal is. They've got 38 different clinical trials going on right now. The balance sheet is great. The only concern that I do have for this company, which is why it would make sense if somebody wants to grab them, they're burning cash flow, John, nearly $500 million. So under that circumstance, you'd think that they'd want to listen if somebody wants to buy them. And if it's Pfizer or whomever, there might even become a bidding war because they've got such a great pipeline right now.
Yep. And anti-cancer is certainly the holy grail for any of these biotechs, folks. So right now it's 33 billion market cap. Like I say, takeover will either be around here, or if Pete says they get a bidding war, then a little bit higher. All right. How about UNP, Union Pacific? Now, these aren't the guys that had the train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, but they are the largest railroad operator in the country, Pete. And apparently a big hedge fund wasn't real happy. If you take a look at the chart, the big hedge fund wasn't happy because the performance has been pretty flat. So when you see that for these guys, there you see it. Look at that, going back a couple years. It's basically right where it was, Pete. And other than dividends, people aren't real happy about stocks that haven't moved up or have moved up and given it back over the past couple of years.
And John, by measure, their operating efficiency has actually been pretty reasonable. I mean, that's something that everybody in the railroad industry looks at, and they're talking about what are their expenditures versus what is their revenue. That's a big factor. And from that perspective, they've done well. The stock itself, not as much. And so I think the frustration has come, and this, we all know this. We've seen this happen in many stocks in the past, where there is somebody who's angry about the performance. As you said, flat's not good enough. They're looking for something that's going to absolutely explode to the upside when they've got the kind of investment. And these guys have a major investment in this. So there is a guy who's in line as well, John, which does make some sense. The former COO, they're going to most likely would want to tap on that shoulder and say, look, you know the company, you were a great operator, you're now going to be the guy who's the CEO. I would expect that to happen. It makes a lot of sense because it's lined up right now for that to happen. And in that particular circumstance, I think UNP could be a definite buy. Bank of America thinks so as well.
Yep, I have to agree that it was smart of them to pay attention, and probably smart for the CEO to basically set himself up with a good exit, and obviously shareholders will benefit. Now, Tesla, Pete, which was trading up better than 5% at one time today, is still having a day. They've got a big investor day coming up on Wednesday, and they telegraphed that, told us about it. They posted up tweets and everything else, and the stock is near the highs of the day on that news. So investor day, they're going to be talking about everything from the Boring Company. I know that's not Tesla, folks, but Elon says we're likely to talk about Boring Company, talk about SpaceX, talk about Tesla.
Yeah, and John, when he does that, I think we're going to get some updates. What's going on in Germany? What's going on in China? Some of the beginnings of what looks to be something very, very strong happening maybe for them in China. We'll find out a lot more, but I will say this. You look at some of the Chinese companies out there, Li being one of them, and some of what the projections look like are starting to make me think, and I'm sure others as well, hey, the EV world is back and they're ready to start putting up and being able to get to the demand side, because the demand is there. That's not been the problem. The problem is, can you get them to those folks that are in demand? And maybe they're going to be able to do that. I think in Germany, that's going to cover a lot of Europe, obviously. And that's where the huge demand is, along with China. So that's where I'd be focused on. What is Elon going to talk about? I understand the U.S., of course, but I think those two different parts of the world make a lot of sense if we get something positive out of them from that.
Yep. And I'll tell you why, folks. I was driving a BMW in Europe, and it was not a huge sports car. It had a good engine in it, but it cost $140 to fill it up. So basically, gasoline and diesel are 2x what it is in the United States. And that's not because of just the demand that's driven up the price. They have a whole buck's worth of taxes on there, Pete, that takes it up basically to $2 a liter, 4 liters to the gallon. You guys can do the math. All right. Let's talk about Fisker, Pete, FSR, because they have basically, they're an EV maker, just like Pete said. There's a lot of interest in the space. Their vehicle called Ocean, they're maintaining their projections for the year, Pete, on what this one's going to do. Shares were up 29% on that. To Pete's point, though, what I'm going to bring up real quick, Pete, is that Tesla just announced that the German Gigafactory can do 4,000 vehicles a week. And these guys are yet to produce one because they haven't been approved yet.
Yeah, it's interesting, John. They do have the orders. They just can't really fulfill what they need to do, and that's been a big problem for them. They're also burning cash, and that's been something that's known by Fisker for a really long time. These guys have a very difficult time keeping the balance sheet in order, and that's something that I think does stand out for me. But I will say this, do you think there's a little bit of a short squeeze going on here, John? Because we're talking about a stock that's got about 20% of the shares are short. So under those circumstances, any good news gives this thing not just a little bit of a bump, but a great big bump. And I think that's why we were seeing the stock go up 25, 29%. It was sitting very close to 52-week lows, but now all of a sudden it's moved off of those lows based on some of the news today about demand, but also, I'm sure, because of the short interest in the stock right now.
I'm sure that's true. And I'll point out, Pete, that even at $7.25 or whatever, this thing is 1/4. That's 1/4 for those of you who have 10 fingers and 10 toes. 1/4 of where it was February of 2021. So just 2 years ago, a quarter of the price gives you an idea that, a lot of problems delivering on what would be otherwise a very popular vehicle if they could actually sell them. But only Elon is out there really selling EVs, Pete. So for that reason, bang, that is my unusual activity, Tesla, because we had bullish call activity. The stock was right where it is now. Some of you ping Pete and I, and you say, hey, how I can't get into these at the prices you guys talk about. Yeah, you can if you were a subscriber. You could. But this is an opportunity because the market softened up today and it's trading at half of where it was to the upside today. So for that reason, 30,000 of the weekly 225 calls. So those calls are out of the money pretty far. But somebody thinks that investor day that I spoke of earlier, that might be a significant driver. I am long Tesla, but not those calls. I'm long at the money calls here, and I've sold upside calls as the stock rallied through 207 today, Pete.
I love how John thinks. And you know why, folks? Because I did the exact same thing. I loved what I saw when I saw but they were so far out of the money, right, John? I mean, what they were buying just seemed like pretty far out. So how could I manipulate myself into a position? And when I'm doing that, be able to get it at a price very close to what that was costing? Well, by giving up a little bit of upside, I'm happy to do that. You put on a spread. Boyle, that's what I'm going after, John. Everybody's been talking about this for a while. When it comes up, when nat gas starts to move either up or down, you start to see something like this where you're a 2X with a little bit of leverage. It starts to move. Now, this is a stock that, John, just over a week ago, it was trading $4.70. You know what they did? They bought 17,000 of the March 10th 5.5 calls. They paid 40 cents for those. I'll update that in 1 second. The next day, they followed it up by buying 16,000 of the March 10 6 calls. Those were 50 cents. Well, today, what do we see going on? Well, they wanted to buy 35,000 March 10 6.5 calls. And now they're getting rid of those 5.5 calls that they paid 40 cents for $1.20. For those of you who don't know the math, that's called a triple. And that's a beautiful thing. And when you get that, you get a pretty big smile on your face. But I think it makes sense what they're doing. They're rolling up and looking for another move, John. And when you look at nat gas and you see the pricing and you know that we were in the $10 range not that terribly long ago, we got all the way down to $2, but we've been on a little bit of a path ever since, recovering off of that $2 level. Not by a lot, but it's starting to move. And that's why I think you're seeing what you're seeing going on here. And that's why these options are going. But understand, this is a leveraged ETF. So you have to understand that going in as well.
Yep, very true. Boyle and what is the other one, Pete? Is it Cold? I know they have the opposite of Boyle, an inverse for nat gas, as well as Boyle, the hot one, but I can't remember the other one. Anyway, what do you got as far as, you were talking on the Sports Huddle, which is your weekly radio show, Pete, that's on terrestrial radio, as well as you can pick it up through Odyssey. The Sports Huddle, it's called. So what were you guys focused on this past Sunday?
Well, John, it's amazing how fast these things creep up on you, and it's why the NFL is the NFL. And we talk about it, and we talk about the shield. And when I'm critical of Roger Goodell, the reason I do that is, hey, this is important to me. It's important to you. You and I both played. You played with the Chicago Bears. I bounced around a little bit to multiple teams, but it's still something deep and we're passionate about, and we want it to be the best that it can be. And I will tell you this, part of the thing that makes them so great, it's 24/7, 365 days a year, John. Where are we right now? Well, we had the Super Bowl. We also had the Pro Bowl. We had the Super Bowl. Then free agency starts getting a little bit. People talking about this, that, and the other. Well, what's the next thing? It's the Combine. And that's where we are now. The Combine's kicking off. Things start this week and they end at the end of the week. And each day there are different groups that are coming in for their section and then the next section. It's a 2-day deal for each and every one of these. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch and see everything there, John. But I'll tell you what happens every single year, and you and I already know this, but somebody comes in either, wow, how about this guy? Or he does something that's unbelievable and everybody goes, oh my God, that guy's the best. Instead of fourth round, that guy's somewhere in the top 20. And it's like, really? That's how you're going to judge this whole thing? You've looked at film for years. You've done all the rest of these things. But suddenly, because he ran a 4.4 instead of a 4.6 40, oh, that guy's the best thing you've ever seen. That's where the mistakes come in. I'll give you a couple examples because there's one for this year that I'll tell you in a second. But Jamarcus Russell, first pick in the entire draft, John. He played at LSU, heck of a football player. I am not disparaging him at all, but threw a lot of interceptions in college, threw over 21 interceptions in a couple of years of playing. He goes in there, he lasts 3 years. He's the number 1 pick in the entire draft. Ryan Leaf is another great example, number 2 pick in the draft. He jumped over everybody because suddenly he's the best thing everybody had seen, except for the fact that he threw a bunch of interceptions at Washington State before he went into the draft, and they suddenly forgot about that on draft day. This year, I got a kid for you, John, Anthony Richardson. Do you know that name at all?
No.
Right. For all the right reasons. I'm glad you said that. He quarterbacked at Florida. He's a sophomore. He's played 2 years of college football, and suddenly he's now somewhere in the top 10 of this draft, even before the Combine. Now, John, let me give you this number. He's 6'4", 230. He's already being compared to Josh Allen. He ain't Josh Allen, number 1. Number 2, look at what he's done as a guy in college. He's done okay, but he hasn't done great. He's a little over 50% passing in college football. 50% passing. 52 is his real number, but 52, 54%, thrown a bunch of interceptions, and yet now he's the second coming of I don't know who. Maybe it's Ryan Leaf, and they want to put him as the 10th pick in the draft. And I'm not trying to be mean about the kid, John. I'm just saying, isn't it amazing the money that goes into this? And everybody goes to Lucas Oil and they get there, and suddenly these guys have suddenly catapulted up under the draft. And this guy's top 10, this guy's top 20. And it's amazing to me when some of the other guys slip down for no reason at all, other than you've got to make room for these guys who leapfrogged them. What do you think?
Well, I think you're onto something there, as you've done many times. Sometimes Pete calls them airport players, meaning when you see them walking through the airport with a 28-inch waist and a 56-inch chest, you think, oh my God. But you know what? There's a reason The Rock, who doesn't quite have those measurements, but there's a reason The Rock didn't make it. There's also a reason I didn't make it. Many of these guys might look like they could be the superstar, but it's what did you do on the field? What is your history of, catching a quarterback from behind when you're rushing from the backside or whatever, or, stuffing on a 3rd and goal, 4th and goal, and you nail the guy and stop it, snuff it out right there. That means a lot more than what you look like. Or what you run as far as a 40 or your vertical or your number of bench presses, because there are people that can bench press the world, 50 times, but they probably aren't your number 1 pick at quarterback or linebacker. Pete, Thursday, we start with linebackers and defensive linemen, right? Mm-hmm. That's because they've broken it down now, folks, as they've gotten better and better at it. And part of the reason is it's entertainment. this is one of the things that draws eyeballs like crazy. So if you want to watch the combine, you got to decide which day you want to see. Do you want to see the linebackers and so forth, like Pete and I love to watch? Well, if you want to see that, that's Thursday. Linebackers and defensive linemen, Thursday. So I'll tell you who I'm watching for. And then it goes D-backs Friday, quarterbacks, wide receivers, tight end, offensive line Sunday. So what do I think are a couple, Pete? I'm going to throw them out real quick. Trenton Simpson, Clemson. Drew Sanders, Alabama. If you saw that kid play, what a beast. Cedric Gray, North Carolina. Jack Campbell, Iowa, a stud. And Iowa produces a lot of great linebackers. They must have a great coach, Pete, as well as attracting good talent. But these two names, I love, Pete. I'm going to have to look at it. DeMarvion Overshawn.
Yeah. Now guess the
I don't want
score.
to mess with DeMarvion. I don't want to mess with him, just like Pete didn't want to mess with Richardson. But that is an all-star name. DeMarvion Overshawn from Texas. Now, how about this one? Diane Henley from Washington State. Those are my top 6, Pete, that I'm going to be watching when I watch the combine. It's on ESPN, folks, so you got no excuse to miss it. All right, Pete, who are you watching?
Well, and I'd also say this, John, and people, we can all look this up. It's all out there for us, but it's amazing. But the combine can get more eyeballs than like NBA playoff games.
Oh, hell yes.
It's amazing how much people want to consume the NFL. So I got a couple sleepers for you, John. Not as colorful as what you had, but I've got some good ones. The tight end from Purdue, Payne Durham. Now, he's one of these guys where he reminds me of Gronk. He's 6'5", 260 pounds. He can block, doesn't mind blocking, and the kid can catch the football. And he showed that in one of the Senior Bowl type things that they have out there. The guy's got great hands. I would encourage people to kind of check him out. And if their team drafts him, they've got themselves a damn good tight end for the next 10 years. UCLA has a kid, John, who's a wide receiver named Jake Bobo. Nobody talks about these guys, which is why it's kind of fun. I think these are sleepers. The kid's 6'5", 220-pound wide receiver who was the number 1 receiver at UCLA, but the problem is nobody watches UCLA play football. It's very much like the Pac-12. They get lost in the shuffle. They always do. But that kid's a kid to watch because he's explosive and he could be something special. The last one I got, and you and I both were on the same plane, Jack Campbell. Now, here's the thing, John. This linebacker from Iowa, Jack Campbell, he's only got everything you'd want, but for whatever reason, I call him a sleeper because he won the Butkus Award, right? He's 6'5", 250 pounds. He can intercept the ball. He can sack the quarterback. He makes nothing but tackles out all over the field. And yet there are 10 other linebackers in front of Jack Campbell going into the combine, at least on all these mock drafts. 10 other linebackers. This guy won the Butkus Award. Now, I wonder why he won that award. Probably because he's the best linebacker in football, which is supposed to be why he won the award. The kid's unbelievable. I can't stress enough how impressed I am with his intelligence on the field, what he's able to do, his size. I think he's going to be the guy, John, that really is a sleeper because if he goes pick, I don't know, 65 or 66 or somewhere in there where he's late second, early third round, you're stealing a guy in the draft. You absolutely are stealing a guy in the draft that makes your defense better. And I'll tell you what team could use him. The Minnesota Vikings, the biggest linebacker in the Vikings, might weigh 220 on a great day if he can. But they don't have anybody who looks like this guy, runs like this guy, or plays like this guy on a lot of different defenses in the NFL. And they're going to want to have a kid like this. So I think these sleepers, that's what makes it fun, I think, John, watching the everything that goes on with the combine. It's just awesome to see the talent and the baby faces when they take off the helmet and you look at them and you just go, that's a man-child right there. That's a man-child. This kid's 21. Are you kidding me? Unbelievable. The athleticism is incredible.
You're right, Pete. And that Campbell is a beast. Yeah. So is that tight end from Purdue. But remember, folks, I'll be hashtagging it. DeMarvion Overshawn from the University of Texas.
Nice.
The pride of Matthew McConaughey.
Oh, that's awesome.
Well, folks, join us tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. I will be on with my friend Charles Payne at 2:25 p.m. today, Eastern Time, to talk about some unusual activity and maybe a little bit about the markets as well. See you tomorrow, folks, 1 p.m. or with Charles at 2:25 p.m. Eastern today.